A million Imperial elites wiped out, and Emperor Ludora considered it all part of the plan. For the surrendered officers resting on floor 70, their lives had been saved by our hand. But any hope of returning home died when Bernie revealed the truth. They were all throwaway pawns, abandoned by an empire that demanded absolute power, and guarded by an overwhelming terror that shattered a single digit's courage. The exception, named Velgrynd. AI Anime and Manga presents. Before we return to the council, please hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And a huge thank you to our Patreon members. Your support helps cover the AI narration and rendering costs for these episodes and gets you early access too. Now, let's get back to the labyrinth. 3 days had passed since Caligulio and his staff were resurrected, and by now they had regained most of their composure. The shock of being brought back to life by a demon lord was hard to put into words, but somehow they had managed to accept it as the truth. The question then became, what happens to us going forward? For now, they were still living and sleeping in tents. Food was arranged for them, carried in regularly by monsters, skeletons in fact, but nobody was complaining. The tents were lined up in a barren, hilly area with no real vegetation. The scenery was dreary, but it was neither too hot nor too cold, making it an oddly comfortable space. The death-laden atmosphere of the battlefield and the long rows of graves for the dead were not any big deal once you got used to them. The people these graves belonged to were out walking and talking in skeleton form anyway, so it would be silly to fear them. In short, it was not an arrangement to wail about at all. According to what they heard, they had been set up on floor 70 of the labyrinth. This was all explained to them by a white king named Adalmann, who oversaw things on this level. Some of the people there had actually fought against him, so nobody doubted who he was. Besides, Adalmann was quite caring of them, treating Caligulio and the others pretty well by POW standards. Adalmann told them, "My God, Sir Rimuru, has deemed fit to resurrect you all, and thus I follow his divine will. He is not the type of person who would take away a life previously given. I will suggest you take your time to think about what you want your future to be like." Based on that philosophy, Adalmann had let Caligulio and his staff go free. But nobody was suggesting they break their way out of this level. Their lives were already in the hands of the gods, they realized, and so they decided to trust in the demon lord Rimuru. Caligulio agreed with this, and besides, he was confident any escape attempt would end in failure. That was why, taking Adalmann's words to heart, he decided to call his staff together for a meeting. Nearly 100 officers were now gathered in a large tent used for military conferences. These were senior staffers, some of the Empire's greatest heroes, but any power they had was well and truly gone now. Caligulio looked at his assembled audience and bowed his head. "All right, people. First off, allow me to apologize. My incompetence is what put you all in this situation, and for that I am sincerely sorry." Nobody there thought the apology was warranted. One aide immediately objected. "What are you saying, my lord? We are just as guilty as you for not stopping His Majesty." The staff nodded their agreement to the aide's statement. The senior officers, most notably Krishna, also agreed that Caligulio was far from the only culprit here. Krishna gave voice to the mood. "I am of the same opinion as everyone else. Thanks to our foolishness, we have incurred the wrath of God Himself. And by God's mercy, we've been given the opportunity to atone for our sins." As he phrased it, the Empire's whole invasion was a sin, and Caligulio agreed with him. As overconfident of their military might as they were, they did not even try to learn much about their enemy. Looking back, Caligulio could hardly believe his own stupidity. The thought that his friends must all be feeling the same way brought an embittered smile to his face. "Thank you," Caligulio answered. "Hearing that makes me feel a little more at peace with myself, and I swear to God that I will never forget this feeling." The moment he said the word God, the image of the demon lord Rimuru flashed through his mind. Yes, as far as I'm concerned, Lord Rimuru may as well be my god. There was no place in the Empire for Caligulio to return to. If he did, he would take the blame for the loss, and they would skip the court-martial and jump right to his execution. He had no intention of shirking his responsibilities. but he thought it wrong to throw away the life granted by Rimuru for nothing. Well, I'll have time to weigh my options there. It was natural for Caligulio to think about putting his own problems off for later. His face was no longer that of a brute driven solely by self-preservation and greed. Then he returned to the purpose of the gathering. Now, let's get to the topic at hand. I've gathered you all here today because I want to build consensus on how we should move forward. Sir Adalmann has generously given me the freedom to consult with all of you in this meeting, so let's try to get some work done so his kindness doesn't go to waste. Once Caligulio said this, the people present exchanged glances and began discussing matters among themselves. That would be unthinkable during a typical military meeting, but Caligulio welcomed it. He wanted honest, unadorned feedback from everyone. After chatting about it for a while, the group narrowed their thoughts down enough to form two major factions. One thought it best to stay here and retain their current allegiance to their captors. The other argued that they must return to the Empire without delay. These two sides were deadlocked with each other, and both arguments were wholly understandable. It was only natural that those with families would want to return home, but whether that was possible depended on the intentions of the Demon Lord Rimuru. Perhaps it would be doable with further negotiations, but if they made too much of a fuss about it, it could put the Demon Lord off. Caligulio tried to set the limit plainly. I would like to believe that he has no interest in executing us for no reason, as Sir Adalmann assures us. But we have to keep in mind that this doesn't mean we're forgiven. Given the way their lives were saved, their fates were all in the hands of the Demon Lord. They might have been granted a little freedom, but getting too selfish presented unknown risks. One officer spoke for the Return Home faction. I imagine all of us in this tent would be executed if we came back. But even despite that, I want to make sure that the soldiers who fought so bravely for their country can get home safely. I'd like to appeal directly to Lord Rimuru and ask him for his favor here. Another officer answered with the colder part of the problem. Perhaps, but keep in mind, we are something akin to hostages right now, and we have no idea whether our nation will pay compensation or not. It's a thorny issue. Then Major General Minitz, who had been silently listening to everyone's takes so far, spoke up. It's not gonna happen. We've never even imagined ourselves as defeated. You know how consistently ruthless we've been in our dealings with hostile nations. The floor fell silent. The Empire had never accepted anything other than unconditional surrender in the past. It was arrogant of them, but given their constant streak of victories, they had a right to be arrogant. But now that they had suffered a total defeat, they would have no one to blame but themselves if they were unforgiven. Everybody here understood that, and they knew that even if they could return to the Empire, their future there would look pretty bleak. Still, some wanted to fulfill their responsibilities to those soldiers with families waiting back home. Major General Minitz is right, one officer admitted. I wonder what His Majesty the Emperor will think about all this. A different officer, unable to hold back any longer, snapped, I hate to say it, but I think our intelligence bureau was far too negligent. How many Demon Lord-class freaks do they think Tempest even had? For an Imperial officer, this remark was wading into taboo territory. Caligulio immediately rebuked him. Hey, watch your mouth, you! I don't care what happens to the IIB at this point, but the ones you called freaks are the major leaders of this nation, you know? The officer shrank back. Sorry, slip of the tongue. Free speech was welcome here, and there were no monsters in the tent. No one had seen Adalmann since yesterday. Caligulio assumed he was off attending to business somewhere. That was why they were having this conference today, but that did not mean they could say anything and everything they wanted. They could not forget their status as prisoners of war. Caligulio made sure the whole tent heard it. Lord Rimuru seems to be a generous leader to me, but I doubt he'll overlook any bad-mouthing of his staff. Remember that well, everyone, and keep an eye on what you say. Despite stating that, Caligulio agreed with his officer's voiced opinion. At the very least, the fact that somebody under Rimuru's command could handle magic as intense as gravity collapse told volumes about how dangerous this Demon Lord was. Why didn't the Imperial Information Bureau know anything about them? I fully understand why he called the IIB negligent. If anything, I wish I said that myself. But then one audience member uttered something that threw cold water on Caligulio and his officers. Bernie, silent until now, suddenly let out that bombshell with a chuckle. Are all of you idiots? Listen to me, the IIB was definitely aware of some intel at least. That's ridiculous, an officer protested. So why did they withhold accurate intelligence from His Majesty? Someone else shouted. They didn't betray us, did they? The whole group was agitated. Only Minitz and Caligulio remained calm, and Minitz was the first to respond. Your name was Bernie, right? The man on an undercover mission not even we were told about? Caligulio added to the question. Right. Single digits like you probably would know some top-secret information that we weren't aware of. So what was the IIB thinking, and what did they want us to do? All eyes focused on Bernie after that question. Everybody on hand wanted to know. The IIB had sworn absolute loyalty to the Emperor. It was hard to believe that they would betray anyone, and that meant Emperor Ludora was in a position to anticipate this happening all along. Bernie snorted at the crowd as he looked around, giving Caligulio and the others sympathetic looks. Then, without hesitation, he dropped another bomb. Well, it's exactly what you're all imagining. The Emperor knew everything. He was already taking your defeat into consideration. That's madness, one officer stammered. Another demanded, what do you mean by that? Are you saying His Majesty knew we'd be defeated but sent the entire army over anyway? A third voice rose over the uproar. Impossible. That's far too much of an insult against the Emperor. The officers were all getting worked up, but someone began to have an inkling of what was going on. Minitz gave the truth a shape. I see. So we were just throwaway pawns the whole time? No, that's not quite the right way to put it, Minitz. Caligulio began. If I had to guess, His Majesty's purpose was... Bernie cut him off. Keep your mouth shut, Caligulio. If someone needs to take the heat for leaking national-level secrets, let it be me, not you. Listen, all of us right now are dead, me included. And if we are, this won't count as betraying the Emperor anyway. Such was Bernie's resolve. He had lost the powers that promoted him to the single digits, even the ultimate force granted to him by the Emperor. Now it was time as a leader to show a new pathway for everyone. Jiwoo murmured his name. Bernie. Sorry, Jiwoo. Bernie replied. But you know I'm never gonna be that loyal to His Majesty. I only served him for one reason, because I knew I could never beat him. That, too, was Bernie telling the truth. For a few moments, the tent seemed to fall away into the memory behind Bernie's fear. Bernie, born in the United States of America 45 years ago, was once an average, freedom-loving student. Somehow, he wound up in this world instead, where Ghidorah discovered him. He was then taken in by Damrata, from whom he learned the art of fighting. This gave him confidence, and somewhere along the line he became vain enough to think he was among the best in the world. But his confidence was shattered by a single woman serving at Emperor Ludora's side, a beautiful woman, and also a truly monstrous creation. A lofty pinnacle that Bernie would never reach, even if he moved heaven and earth and went through thousands of reincarnations. It was hard to believe such a being even existed, but reality was all too cruel to him. The woman's name was Velgrynd, one of the Empire's most closely guarded secrets, one that must never be spoken of to outsiders. One day, Bernie was escorted by Damrata to the Emperor's palace, a great honor that fueled his ambitions even further. As a lover of freedom, he detested the idea of an emperor who dominated every aspect of people's lives. He dreamed, however foolishly, that he could overthrow the emperor if he just had a chance. The price of that foolishness was paid in fear, for when Bernie met Velgrynd for the first time that day, he was immediately seized by it, giving in wholeheartedly to it. As Bernie was gripped by this fear, Emperor Ludora addressed him from beyond the curtain. Ludora's voice sounded entirely free of emotion as it said, "You have the qualifications, the requirements to serve as a vessel. I will lend you my powers. Please keep up the good work." It was as if the Emperor's words were echoing out from some faraway point. The next thing Bernie knew, he was in absolutely no position to defy him any longer. The memory faded, and Bernie returned to the tent with the answer he had been carrying. His Majesty doesn't care if 1,000,000 of his elites are wiped out. In fact, that's all part of the plan. That sentence by itself made little sense, but Caligulio knew what it meant. "Oh," Caligulio said, the implication settling in. "So he's willing to sacrifice 1,000,000 officers and enlisted men if it results in someone like me awakening." Hearing Caligulio give the correct answer after so little explanation surprised Bernie slightly. But hearing him say someone like me awakening made it clear how he knew. "Ah, so you're awakened too? Then I think you probably understand it all. Yes, you're right. His Majesty's goal is to build a collection of awakened people to serve as his pawns. If he can gain even one more of them, that's easily worth 1,000,000 casualties to him." This was a truth that not even the Empire's senior officers were aware of. From the very beginning, Emperor Ludora expected nothing from his military. The most important thing to him was how many awakened personnel he could collect. Minitz gave Bernie a sharp gaze. Quality over quantity sort of thing. So when we took on Veldora 3 centuries ago and failed, Bernie was aloof as always. I don't know what happened back then, but if you think about it, doesn't it make sense to you? I can kill every man in this tent by myself. Or I could have, I mean. That's how vast the power gap was. I see. Minitz sounded convinced. And that's why it was a given that we'd be defeated then. The whole strategy was built on the assumption that we'd take horrific losses. I'd like to call it a brilliant move on His Majesty's part, but this time it was just a disaster. Bernie gave a small nod. Exactly. I'm sure His Majesty didn't expect us to lose after your awakening. Caligulio listened bitterly. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't good enough. He mumbled it out, his tone self-deriding, but Bernie denied it. It's all right. It's not that you weren't up to the challenge, we just matched up poorly against our opponent. Yeah, Jiwoo agreed. There was nothing we could do against that. She and Bernie had both lost to Diablo, the same demon who defeated Caligulio. If they could not beat a freak of nature like that, they assumed Caligulio could not either. Caligulio asked the next question. So you're saying Tempest's strength was beyond what the IIB projected? Looks that way, yeah. The plan was to use the Demon Lord Rimuru as a stepping stone to gain more pawns for us, but we blew our chances because we misjudged our opponent's strength. Bernie could not help but laugh, as inappropriate as that was considering all the personnel lost. But he still wished he could rub this in the Emperor's face someday. Well, Bernie, Minitz said, you were trying to use us as a diversion so you could stage your sneak attack, I suppose, but it failed. What are you gonna do now? I told you. I'll take the heat for it, okay? What do you mean? Minitz calmly asked. A few moments passed, everyone in the tent silently waiting for Bernie's answer. Let me get one thing straight with you folks first. Like I just said, you guys are all already dead. I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean you're dead as far as His Majesty is concerned. Minitz followed the logic. Is it trouble for him if we stay alive like this? That's not quite the way to put it. The Emperor has no use for soldiers who've been deprived of their powers and have zero chance of awakening. And if he has no use for you, then he has no reason to protect you either. Minitz accepted that. I suppose not, no, Bernie continued. Think of it on that basis, and there's a real good chance they won't accept any prisoners if Tempest offers them. And not just that. If the surviving soldiers return home, it'll spread anti-war sentiment across the Empire. Do you think that's in line with His Majesty's will? Doubtful, Minitz answered. Minitz sighed. Now he understood what Bernie wanted to say. He asked, and since we're no longer important to His Majesty, we're just a third wheel to the IIB? Bernie gave a short nod. You got it. Minitz followed that to the end. And they'll seek out and deal with anyone who tries to return home, Bernie answered. Definitely. And then they would pin the blame on Tempest to stir up the anger and vengeance of their people, likely. Bernie was confident that was what the IIB would do. And that was the story he was giving the tent now. But we're talking 700,000 people, one officer objected. It'd be impossible. Another argued from the soldiers' side. The people who underwent enhancement surgery didn't lose that much power. If we fight back, we'd be fighting against our own side. Minitz raised a hand to quiet the startled officers. Minitz asked, do you have an idea of who might be capable of that? Most of the audience thought the idea was ridiculous. But Minitz remained cool-headed. Caligulio, remembering what happened when he was awakened, remained silent. With that kind of power, he concluded, it was not so impossible at all. Minitz pressed Bernie. Could the single digits do it? Bernie answered, if that's a yes-no question, then the answer is yes, but that's just armchair theorizing. If a single person has absolute power, that's good for offense but not for defense. If the enemy swarms you with huge numbers, then inevitably you'll have areas you can't fully defend. At the same time, it's also not a suitable approach if you're pursuing a fleeing enemy. If they scatter in all directions, you'll inevitably miss out on some. In this case, it would be necessary for the Empire to take all of them out with no survivors whatsoever. Bernie did not know anyone who would be capable of that, with one exception. Bernie said, now common sense dictates that this is impossible, right? But it's not. The Empire's got an absolute freak of nature who can pull that off. Bernie recalled the figure in his mind. It made him shiver. The beauty and the horror could only be understood by those who had an encounter. Bernie was one of them, and that fact made him very unhappy. Minitz sat back in his seat and looked up at the ceiling. Someone that makes a single digit like you quake in their boots? It appears that I'm gravely mistaken here. Caligulio's voice went hollow. Me too. I joined the military because I dreamed of ruling the world in the name of the Empire. But now everything was being decided in a place that had nothing to do with the military. These power struggles were being played by someone else, and there was no room for the non-awakened to butt in. Caligulio let out the bitter thought first. Foolish of us, wasn't it? Minitz answered, yeah, what a farce. Caligulio and Minitz exchanged glances, both looking ready to cry. And not just them. All the other officers in the tent looked like they had just woken up from a dream, and they were not happy about it. It's so pathetic, Bernie thought. Everyone would have been a lot happier if they did not know the truth, but then they would not have been convinced about their situation. That was why Bernie laid it all bare for them, leaving nothing behind. Bernie brought the tent back to the point. So do you see now? You understand the situation you're in? If you go back home, there'll be nothing but despair waiting for you. You gotta stay here as prisoners and just wait until the war's over. One officer addressed him with a new kind of respect. Sir Bernie, what are you going to do? Bernie answered. I'm going back to the Empire. The war's not gonna end anytime soon at this rate, so Lord Rimuru is probably gonna try negotiating with the Empire, and he'll need a guide for that, won't he? And that guide would almost certainly be disappeared. The current powerless Bernie would absolutely be assassinated, but he was determined to do it. Now everyone was silent. Here and now, they understood all too well that the Demon Lord Rimuru had an iron grip on all of their fates. After expressing my gratitude to Veldora and Ramirez, I decided to go to floor 70 of the labyrinth. Adalmann, following yesterday's evolution ritual, had fallen into a deep sleep. His harvest festival was underway, but his castle was still fully wrecked, so we dragged him to a guest room up top and had him sleep there. Alberto and Venti were put into their own quarters as well, and I was sure they would all be waking up soon enough. But the Imperial prisoners of war were a problem for me. Adalmann was taking care of them, and it would not be good to leave them unattended. Besides, I was hoping they were calm enough by now to give me some more information about the Empire. It was a good opportunity for that anyway, so I decided to go and check on them. I had my 2 secretaries accompanying me, and I figured that would be enough to keep me safe through anything. Shion sounded worried.
You didn't have to go do this yourself, Sir Rimuru.
I turned that concern around on her. Oh, you want to do it for me then?
Yes! Go down there and talk to them.
Diablo brightened at once.
Right. Off we go then.
Diablo never changes, does he? And maybe that was true for Shion too. There was no way they would voluntarily go down there. I would never let Shion do this alone, I thought as she hugged me close to her chest. It was odd that they were both fine the day after the evolution ritual though. Shion was still unchanged after a full 24 hours, and Diablo was completely back to his usual self. I asked Diablo, so did you manage to acquire any new abilities?
Well, thanks to you, Sir Rimuru, I finally succeeded in obtaining an ultimate skill. Now I don't have to sit there and fume while Guy annoys me with his bragging.
I'm sure Guy found Diablo far more annoying than the other way around. Like, I'm totally confident about that. Well, if that was so frustrating for you, you should have acquired one on your own. I'm sure you could have figured out an ultimate skill without my help, Diablo.
No, I couldn't have. If I gained the skill after Guy told me about his, it'd be like I was copying him. It would look terrible.
I don't get it. This is not about who's copying whom, you know? If there's something useful out there, why don't you just have him teach it to you? Or am I thinking about this all wrong? Xian sniffed at Diablo's logic.
How narrow-minded of you, Diablo. Better to ask than go astray, as I think they say, and ever since Sir Rimuru taught me that, I've always striven to listen to what people have to say. Gobichi has taught me the true essence of cooking as well, and now I've acquired full mastery of my craft.
Xian seemed awfully smug about that, but personally I think Gobichi just wanted to get away from her. I really wish Gobichi would not go giving Xian this strange confidence of hers too. He needs to step up and take care of her to the bitter end, you know? Diablo, with perfect timing, picked at the wound.
Oh, was that the reason why Sir Gobichi was hospitalized a bit ago? If he had to put up with your cooking all the time, no wonder he fell ill.
Yeah, maybe I should not be chiding Gobichi after all. But Diablo had gone through some tough times on this front as well. And Shuna did not even dare taste test anything Xian created. So who would deal with Xian's cooking? It was gonna have to be Benimaru, wasn't it? Yeah. It was his responsibility to educate Xian, and I would make sure that was clear with him. And I was not saying that just because I wanted to needle the newlywed or anything. Please do not misunderstand me here. Xian got us all derailed, but as we chatted on, we reached our destination in no time. Once we were transported over to the hilly area of floor 70, we were greeted by some people who shot up and saluted the moment they saw us. I was not sure that was really the appropriate thing to do with the demon lord of an enemy nation, but Diablo and Xian seemed satisfied with it, so I did not quibble. One of the soldiers called out, "Lord Rimuru has graced us with his presence. Summon Lord Caligulio at once." And with that, the soldiers started jogging to and fro, forming a column that led directly to a single tent. Caligulio was conducting a military conference in there, according to the people guiding the way for us. Inside the tent were 100 or so important-looking people. They all saluted, on their feet and demonstrating impeccable posture. Getting this treatment from the top brass surprised me a little. I mean, I was the king of their enemy, and I was in slime form right now too. But nobody was looking down on me, and I guess Raphael's suggestion was more successful than expected. It was only natural, I suppose, if you thought about it. If someone kills you and then brings you back to life, it was probably wise to fully submit to them. If I ran into someone like that, you can bet I would not defy them. Convinced of this, I sat down on the seat at the head of the table I was guided to. I needed to be dignified here, so I changed over to human form, with Xian and Diablo behind me. Xian looked a little disappointed to not have me in her arms, but getting preoccupied with that was pointless, so I looked around the room and began to speak. All right, folks. Having all the big shots in one place is kinda helpful to me, actually. The officers answered as one. Yes, my lord. They all bowed their heads at once. It was gonna be hard to talk with them like this, so I asked them to sit down before I began. Relax, guys, okay? I've got something I want to discuss. I gave them a warm smile. Hopefully this would ease their minds a little and enable us to have a nice, pleasant chit-chat. Adalmann is busy with other matters at the moment, so he might not be able to come back for a while. So I was wondering if you guys had any requests for me right now. Caligulio provided the answer for the rest of them. That is too kind of you, my lord. We are always well taken care of here, so please do not concern yourself about our plights. Eesh, so formal. This treatment was just beyond stuffy. Then again, they had lost the war, so I suppose this would be normal of them anyway. Well, great then. So regarding our plans for the future, Caligulio cut in before I could continue. Yes, my lord. There is actually something we would all like you to do on that matter. They had a request after all, huh? I was fine with that, as long as it was not anything too unreasonable. Then Caligulio gave me quite a surprise. We are hoping that we could be taken care of within this country for the time being. So if possible, we'd like to ask for your continued kindness. I pressed for more details. According to Caligulio, they were actually discussing their future direction when I stopped in. The conclusion they came to was that, if they returned to the Empire, it was very likely they would all be killed. Whoa, are you guys crazy? What kind of country kills the soldiers that fought for it just because they lost? I could not help but blurt that out. Bernie, of all people, replied first. But I think that's exactly what will happen. He was calm and logical now. It was hard to believe this was the same guy who attacked us. As he explained, nobody here could say that this grisly fate was not possible for them. So they'd sacrifice 1 million to awaken just one person? You've got to be kidding. Caligulio answered on behalf of the tent. It's the truth, my lord. Well, hang on. If that's true, then isn't it weird how they held off on a military invasion for so long because they feared that Veldora's seal was broken? Maybe we had that wrong and they were actually waiting for his return? Bernie bowed his head. I'm afraid that not even I can understand Emperor Ludora's thoughts on the matter. However, Lord Rimuru, I humbly believe that your observation is correct. Is this really Bernie? He was so polite that it seemed like a whole other person. But that was the deal here, huh? This guy Ludora's true objective was not just to win this war. He was going to pit the generals and soldiers of this empire against an enemy powerful enough to weed out the losers from those who would be awakened by the experience. The sheer scale of this was too much for regular people to even comprehend. Raphael answered inside my mind.
Report. It is an interesting idea.
Stop that, dumbass. There was nothing interesting about using human beings as test subjects. Raphael did act up like this sometimes, didn't it? Zegian was a successful example of such experimentation. For all I knew, maybe I was being the guinea pig for some other experiment of Raphael's. Raphael replied at once.
Negative. There is no confirmation of such a situation.
Oh, really? I mean, I believed it, but anyway, that could wait. The question was whether to accept Caligulio's request. You know, though, it costs money to feed all you guys. When we're talking 700,000 of you, that means importing food from other nations too, so if they were likely going to be killed back home, I was a little hesitant to just kick them out of Tempest. But honestly speaking, there was no reason for us to take care of them. I was only responsible for my own people. These guys, well, I would like them to make the most of their lives, but I could not do everything, you know? If we took in an influx of 700,000 trained military personnel, our neighbors to the west were not going to keep quiet about that. Blumend especially. In fact, it could even lead to needless blood being spilled. Still, it would be kinda cold to just tell them to go home. I already saved their lives once, so I guessed I should take responsibility for them right to the end. No other option, really, besides taking care of them. But I was not gonna do it for free. In our nation, you know, we have a credo that only those who put in the work deserve to have food on the table. If we're gonna feed you, we need you to work for it, but are you okay with that? The room had awaited my response with bated breath. Once I finished speaking, they all looked delighted. Several officers answered at once. Absolutely, my lord. Others immediately followed. Order anything you want from us. They sure were motivated, even though I had not told them what they would be doing yet. Either way, I would allow them to stay here then. I had assumed that prisoners of war did not mean much to the Empire. There were no Geneva Conventions here, no rules that warring states were expected to follow. The way Bernie described it, these POWs would not be much of a bargaining chip for negotiating a ceasefire. If so, better to just commit and accept them as a labor force. The length of their stay was still to be determined, but they would be working for us until at least the end of the war. They might not be too useful if their stay here was too short, but we would have to wait and see how that panned out. Hopefully they would prove useful for something or other anyway. The officers here did not seem to have any intention of defying me at least. Maybe I could just leave them to Geld and have him take advantage. But he was in an evolutionary sleep right now and unavailable for a little while. So what could they do until he woke up? By the way, are you guys any good at public works projects? It often comes as a surprise that a military would be full of people good at engineering. In my previous life, it was a well-known fact that when a warlord of ye olde Japan wanted to build a castle, his samurai were the ones who oversaw the construction. Even in modern times, Japan's self-defense forces played a huge role in things like disaster relief. The news would talk about how active they were in overseas aid projects and so on. Similarly, the engineers over in Dworgen had some pretty high-tech talent. They were not the most glamorous soldiers, but they were quite useful. It was no exaggeration to say that Kaijin, ex-leader of the Dwarven Engineering Division, literally laid the foundation for that whole kingdom. So there had always been that link between the military and civil engineering, but Caligulio perked up at the opening. Oh, of course! I'm proud to inform you that the Empire's technological capabilities are the best in the world. Good. In that case, let's see what they can do. All right, here's your first task then. You see that destroyed castle out there? I want you guys to restore it to its former glory for me. I'll work out the supplies for it, but I want you guys to handle everything else from design on up. Can you do that? Since they destroyed it and all, I thought it would be nice if they could fix it up as well. Caligulio eagerly nodded at me. As you wish, he said, looking supremely confident. A few men, presumably his staff, immediately got to work with all the swiftness of a well-oiled machine. They looked like people ready to do the job. Once Adalmann woke up, he could send some skeletons over to help out, and I thought we could get this thing rebuilt in the not-too-distant future. Now the Imperial Army had a job.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.